Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us in this deep dive technical session where we're going to focus on Exabeam and how Exabeam can help you deliver the promise of your SOC by using machine learning and automation. If you have joined us in the previous session, we spoke in generally around security operations and how machine learning is impacting security monitoring and what are the main areas that we should focus on. If you haven't, please feel free to reach out to have this discussion with us. As part of this session, this is going to be more focused on Exabeam. We're going to help you understand more about our product and our offering and what does it do exactly and how is it going to transform the way you operate your security operations center today. I'll just take a minute before that to introduce myself. My name is Rami Gherbal. I am a senior sales engineer here at Exabeam, focusing on the Middle East and Turkey region. I have been working in the data analytics and security analytics space for a while, over the past 10 years, I would say. Worked with multiple SIM vendors and also had the pleasure to participate and help build multiple security operations centers and cyber defense center across the GCC, from national security level to commercial or service provider type SOCs. So hopefully I'll try to make this experience useful today and help you understanding more about the challenges that we have faced over the years in building security operations center and how we are trying to solve these challenges today. Also, a bit of background around, about the company for people who were not able to join us in the earlier session. Exabeam is an analytics company. We have been founded on the goal of improving and transforming security operations centers by adding machine learning based analytics on top of existing third party SIM solutions. Our offering has evolved over time to cover a complete next generation SIM platform. And you would notice that in the space of just 5 years, we've been able to disrupt the industry fairly significantly, I would say. Regarding the way we address the market or our go-to-market approach, you will find that the majority of our focus is going to be improving security operations centers that are already operating on third-party technologies by adding advanced capabilities or building them from scratch using our next generation SIM platform. Exabeam is a SIM platform, and it is also an analytics platform that can be plugged on top of any other SIM. And this is the power of our analytics is one of the main reasons why we are a leader in the Magic Quadrant from Gartner over the past few years, and we have been able to climb this quadrant fairly quickly over the past few years. So enough about the company and about me. I think let's start talking business and interesting stuff. I'll just take a minute to describe a little bit how our SOCs operating today and what are they having to deal with, most importantly. So generally, the traditional way that we have seen security operations center operate over the past years is that they try to break down their operations around detection of threats, triage, investigation of alerts, and then response. So this is a typical cycle that we're seeing security operations center operate based on. So, and this is fitting the, I would say, the process or the flow of operating a SIM solution. A lot of the aspects seen in this workflow are virtually completely manual. So, for example, when we talk about correlation, log correlation, and the ability to find threats across hundreds of thousands or sometimes millions of logs, we need to be looking at manually configured rules. There is always a need to know which rules to configure or enable, and also tune over time to be able to detect threats. Once we have the rules in place, we are looking at alerts. The only job of rules are to generate alerts, and usually from that point beyond, it's also the job of the analyst, where they need to take it into their own hands and try to triage to understand what alert makes sense, what alert doesn't make sense, where do I need to start investigating, what is less important, what is more important, and moving forward. Depending on the triage and selection criteria, we start talking more about investigation, gathering evidence, and hopefully building a timeline. Every security investigation should lead to a timeline of events that give us a full story of what happened before, during an alert, and after an alert. And all of this is going to be manual today. And of course, after that, we're going to respond to this security incident by deciding what needs to be done in order to stop this threat, to remediate it, and to isolate it. So this is the way we are operating today. Again, if we take into consideration some of the challenges that we have highlighted in our previous presentation, we have shortage of skills and resources. Also, this approach is not scalable. We cannot have as much rules as we need in order to cover all possible threats. And the more rules you have, the more alerts you will get. The more alerts you will get, the more time you need to investigate. So the result is going to be, it's either we're going to have less rules, meaning less threat coverage, or we're going to have incomplete investigations, meaning maybe some interesting things are gone unnoticed. So this is why we have introduced machine learning to improve all of these processes. So whenever we say machine learning, a lot of times people think that we are talking about specifically threat detection and how we can detect behavioral changes, but this is not necessarily stopping there. We're going to see how machine learning is going to impact all of those areas up to the response phase. So for that, we're going to describe how a security operations center is going to look like with Exabeam in comparison to a traditional security operations center. So the first difference we will see with Exabeam is that we will replace manual and static correlation with behavioral analytics and machine learning. So instead of us having to first of all, brainstorm and try to predict what are the possible attack scenarios that are going to happen. And after that, keep tuning them along the life cycle of our operations center. This is going to be purely based on behavior. So we are going to introduce the first step of automation there, where the threat discovery or the threat detection is going to be automated, because it's going to be based on anomaly detection or behavioral change detection. So there's going to be a learning phase where the behavior is going to be baseline to understand who's supposed to do what and what is the behavior of every server, of every machine, of every user, etc. And this will allow us to understand if there's any change in that behavior. And hopefully every attack is a change in the behavior, because we're not being attacked every day, right? So at least we hope that. So and this is the best way to identify suspicious activities. So, and the impact of machine learning and data analytics doesn't stop there, right? We're going to also apply it to the triage phase. So instead of throwing at you 100 alerts with high, medium, low severity, we're going to use a more intelligent risk-based approach, where it's going to take context into consideration to help you understand that, for example, for user A, we have seen that many deviations, and this is going to be much more critical than this isolated alert that doesn't mean anything without manual investigation. So this is also the second step of automation there, where triage is going to be completely automated, because the most risky behavior is going to be surfaced to be on top, as opposed to just alerts with no link whatsoever among them. The third step, which is going to help tremendously in reducing manual effort, and also it's going to reduce the dependency on skills, is the automation of investigation. When I first saw Exabeam, I wasn't even aware that investigation can be automated. I was under the impression that machine learning is used just to detect anomalies. But today, what Exabeam can do, instead of giving you an anomaly and you having to understand what happened before, during, and after in order to have a one, root cause analysis, and two, also a full assessment of the impact of the threat, this is going to be fully automated. Why look at individual logs where you can look at a full story that gives you all the details that you need to know from all the sources that you have in your organization in a single sequence that's going to tell you a story in plain English. So this is automated timelines, and this is to make a huge difference in the way security operations centers operate. And last but not least, we're going to talk about security automation and orchestration. This is the automation part related to the response phase. So after we have identified the threats, after we have made sure that the most important threats are made relevant to you, and after we have also automated the investigation for you, we are able also to automate the response by triggering the required action in order to isolate or remediate a certain incident. Now, SOAR is going to be a more familiar concept for most of us. So in the next part of the presentation, we're not going to spend too much time on it, because this is a part of the SOC that has received already enough publicity, I believe. Exabeam has a fully fledged SOAR solution, which can be compared to any advanced SOAR solution out there. What we're going to focus on next is how we are able to automate a more, I would say, organic tasks or aspects of the SOC Operations Center, which are related to, first of all, a threat discovery, because we cannot respond to something that we haven't detected. And second of all, how to make the most important alerts outlined properly. Because again, we cannot automate if we have hundreds of alerts. And third, most importantly, how we are automating investigation. Because of course, we cannot automate unless we are sure that the investigation piece is done right, because otherwise our automation of the response is going to have less value because of the rate of false positives. So this is going to be the introduction for our next part of this presentation, where we're going to look at the solution, look at how Exabeam solution works and how it's going to transform the way we are dealing with security operations. All right, so jumping into the platform demo. Normally when we talk about security monitoring, a lot of people directly think that we're going to see dashboards and statistics. And this is the first difference you'll see with Exabeam. Why do we need to monitor dashboards while we can have machines or algorithms monitor the dashboards on our behalf and tell us what needs our attention? And this is where we're going to start with Exabeam. Instead of us having to look at the dashboard, sorry, and try to find something that looks slightly interesting, the machine learning algorithms are going to create thousands of dashboards in the background, and they are going to monitor them for us, and they're going to present us with whatever needs our attention in a form of risk-based representation of our organization, be it our users, meaning user credentials, or our assets. And by assets, we mean any type of object. Can be a server, can be an endpoint, and can be an IoT device whatsoever. So instead of having loads of alerts and us having to figure out who's the concerned user and who's the concerned server, the machine learning algorithms are going to link all of those beforehand for us, and also the dashboards are going to be monitored automatically. I know this might sound a little bit unusual, but this is just an analogy to give you an idea of what is happening in the background. So the first thing we will look at here is a pre-qualified view of our security posture. So a lot of pre-qualification has been done to present us only with what's important. And to understand more what's really happening in the background, let's take a close look into what exactly is going on behind the scenes. We talk about, in the first session, we spoke about behavior profiling and how is this going to be useful. So let's try and dig deeper now to understand what this really means. So what we're looking at now is a user profile in Exabeam. So this is going to constitute our knowledge of this user. And in this example, it's a user. It can be an asset, it can be an endpoint, it can be any device on our network whatsoever. So what Exabeam Analytics platform will do in the backend is, as this user lives on with their life in our network and using our applications, we will collect all the data from all the devices that we have, being, for example, our servers, our network devices, our security devices, our applications, our databases, etc. And we will baseline this behavior across all these different categories that we see in front of us. So for every single user, we will have somewhere between 600 to 1,000 different behavioral baselines. And each one of those is going to be equivalent to a dashboard panel in the classic SIM terminology. So let's take an example here, for example, assets. So part of the baselining or the behavior profiling that we do for every user is we understand their asset activity. For example, let's take this example here. What type of assets this user is logging on locally? Usually when there's a logon operation, it has multiple forms. It can be remote, it can be local, it can be a lot of other things. So when it comes to local logon for this particular user, this is our behavioral profile for them. So we have seen over time that 100% of the time where we have seen local logons, they were coming from this particular workstation. And I have the workstation name in front of me here. What does this mean effectively? It means that this is the normal behavior for Mr. Frederick when it comes to local logons. This is going to help me moving forward. Whenever I see a local logon for Frederick, I'm going to compare it against this behavioral baseline. If it's matching whatever we have seen before, then it's okay. If it's not, then we're going to consider this as being a little bit interesting. Now, in this particular dashboard panel, if you want to call it, this is going to be straightforward, right? Because it's just one value, and anything outside this one value is going to be unusual. But sometimes it's going to be more complicated. For example, here, when it comes to remote access. So the assets that this user has access to remotely, we have 35 values. So he has access 35 different servers or workstations remotely. And now the machine learning algorithms will take care of defining something that we call like a virtual threshold to identify which hosts or assets are less usual than others and to be treated as abnormal behavior. And similarly to these two examples, we're going to have, as I mentioned earlier, a couple of hundreds of different baselines. So this is, if we want humans to monitor things like that, we're going to have to create around 700 to 800 different dashboards per user to be able to detect this type of behavior. Of course, this is not possible. And this is what makes this different. This is what makes this more efficient. So same thing that we did for assets, we are also doing it, for example, for locations. If you have multiple locations, to try to baseline where is this user moving around, the time of their activity. For example, focus on VPN, something that is very important nowadays, with the increase of work from home and roaming users and etc. Instead of having to create static blacklists to warn us if there's, for example, a connection from a certain country, instead we are going to baseline the behavior for every user. For example, this gentleman here, Frederick, we have seen him coming from the United States predominantly. So anything outside that's going to be abnormal for them. Also, how much data they are uploading over VPN, how much time they are spending. So it's going to be very unique to them. And at the same time, we can understand which hosts or which machines he's using to connect to the VPN. So for example, this is a very advanced use case. If someone is using an unauthorized or an unmanaged device to connect to the VPN, it's going to be fairly unusual, then it's going to be detected. There is no way I can create a blacklist or a whitelist that can track something like that. So as we dig deeper into it, it's going to become more and more advanced. So if we take into consideration endpoint activity, we'll track all the processes that every user has been running, all the files that they have been accessing and where they have been accessing files and what time. Same goes for physical access. For web activity, also very important element, which domains they are usually accessing, how much data they are uploading over here, the countries in which the websites they are browsing reside, which browsers they are using. So every single activity is going to be looked at from a number of different angles to make sure that the slightest deviation is going to be noticed. And the beauty about this is that it's all going to be automatic. So the idea here is that we are understanding what is normal. And once we understand what is normal, it is going to be very easy to identify what is suspicious, because suspicious equals abnormal. So if we take this example over here, we have seen 98% of the activity when it comes to source hosts per user, meaning where I have seen this user being used to log in, is coming from this workstation, whereas here with this workstation that has the weird name, I have only seen it one time. So this is dangerous. Now, for me as a human, looking at this obviously looks unusual and it looks a bit off, right? So I'm gonna straight away identify it. But the idea here is that we don't want to waste your time and your resources monitoring dashboards anymore. This is the age of machine learning and automation. So we're going to have up to 700 to 1,000 different baselines per user, and they are going to be monitored constantly by algorithms to identify abnormal behavior. And this is the first step of automation that we have talked about. So the discovery of suspicious behavior is going to be automated. Now, what comes next? So once we have identified this odd workstation, what are we going to do with it? So again, we talked about a triage. Usually the next step would be triage. We are used to seeing a large number of alerts and having to qualify which ones are useful and which ones are useless. So in Exabeam, we have also skipped this step by using automation. So instead of raising all these anomalies to you to figure out which ones are important, we have come up with a risk score that we're going to track for every user and every object for that matter. And from this point onwards, every violation across all of these different baselines is going to have a risk score, and this score will accumulate to give us a more accurate understanding of the risk that poses the behavior of this particular user or particular asset. So the outcome is going to be what we have seen on the main screen. So whenever I see user Julieta is having 500 and something risk score, if I want to translate this to the world of the sim we are living in today, this is going to become roughly, I would say, maybe 15 different alerts, ranging from low to medium to high, and completely scattered with no link whatsoever between them. It's for the analysts themselves to go and dig deeper to understand that all of these are linked together. And this might take hours. Even sometimes it might not happen at all. Why? Because of the number of alerts, sometimes we don't have time to go through all of them. So imagine having 100 different alerts, 10 of them being high priority. Of course, you will start with the high priority. But what if the 90 remaining are all concerning the same asset or the same user? Does this mean that the high priority alerts pose more risk to us? Definitely not, because I have 90 different alerts concerning the same user, which means that there's a lot of things that happen that need our attention. And the nature of how sim works, it's not linking those together. And this is why we're skipping this step using machine learning and most importantly, data science, I would say. So starting from this point, we have already saved the effort of tuning the rules and creating them and enable them. We have saved the effort of triage. So the next step would be investigating why are these users being considered as risky. So for that, we also continue the improvement and the transformation of the SOC operation. So if I want to know why user Billy is being considered as risky while having 397 points of risk, all I have to do is just to click on their risk score. And instead of being presented with random log messages that I have to pivot and drill through, I will be presented with a sequence of events that is going to tell me the full story around what happened. So the reason why we have considered Billy to have this much risks involves 17 different events concerning one account where he has accessed 13 different assets in 3 different network zones. And all of these, they have triggered 29 different anomalies. And this is the story that happened. So first he logged in to this machine. So we will have on the left-hand side a description of the event that happened. And on the right-hand side, we will have the context as to what does Exabeam think about this particular event. So whenever we have nothing or this gray rectangle on the right-hand side, this means that this event is normal, has been considered as normal. And whenever there is something that is relatively abnormal about what we're saying, this is where the description will pop up on the right-hand side to tell me what exactly is wrong with this activity. And the importance of this is that this is going to show us both normal and abnormal activity, because if we want a full story, we need to, we don't have, or we cannot skip any step of the story. And this is what any, I would say, crime scene investigation would do. You wouldn't focus just on the suspicious stuff. You need to get the full picture in order to understand the full story. So the user Billy, he logged into this machine. Okay, perfect. So this is something that is seen as usual. And then he accessed this server. So we have seen that this is something that's fairly unusual for him. This is the first time he's accessed this server that has the name IL, IPS, etc. So if I look at his previous behavior, by clicking on his name, I can see that he has accessed a lot of assets remotely, but not this one. Okay, so the baseline is accessible for me right on the fly. So it has been considered as abnormal because it's the first time for him as a person, but also it is abnormal for someone from New York office to communicate with the zone. So this person is usually sitting in another location. So if we look at his profile, he's usually from Los Angeles office. So this is the first time we have seen him communicate from New York office. And at the same time, also his machine has never been seen in New York office. So one event, we have evaluated it from all these different angles, and the result was that it has violated 3 baselines, and the result was a total of 27 points of risk. So in the world of the sim, this will be 3 different alerts. And to be more accurate, I don't think any sim can detect something like that, because you cannot in the sim keep track of every user which server they're logging into. Otherwise, it's going to be very complicated to keep track of. So as we continue with the behavior of this user, he has logged into multiple different assets, and then we started seeing email activity. So he's sending emails to iCloud, and this has been considered as abnormal for these different reasons. Why? Because he sent this amount of data, and this is something that has been defined already, for example, as being a threshold, 5 megabytes. So this is a combination of rule-based versus behavioral-based, something that we spoke about in our first presentation, how we can combine the two. So the first one is rule-based. I have a threshold of 5 megabytes, but I also have the behavioral threshold. So for this particular user, usually he's sending around 8 kilobytes to a public domain, but today he's sending 26. So the risk has now increased, okay? And at the same time, iCloud.com, this is the first time I'm seeing it across the whole organization, and also the first time I'm seeing it for this particular user. So the idea here is that we are not only tracking the person's behavior against their own history, we also compare it against everyone else in the organization, and we also compare it against their peers. So we have a concept of peer grouping. For example, people who are having the civil engineer title, or people who are having the same behavior as we mentioned in the initial or the first presentation. So again, one activity is triggering a lot of violations, and this is going to be reflected in terms of risk. So as we scroll down, we start seeing the colors change. So the color coding is going to help us identify different types of activities. So if we look at the color coding, for example, yellow is going to be web, brown is going to be file activity, purple is going to represent database. What does this mean? When I'm investigating something on the SIM, if I want to pivot from, for example, I started here with a login, and I want to pivot to see what files did he access, I need to write a different query, or I need to pivot to a different log source. Here, it's completely automatic. It's laid out in front of me that he accessed these files, named patents, whatever, and this is the first time he's accessing those. And he's also accessed a website that has been labeled as being a DGA. So again, here we are seeing a combination of intelligence. It's not only something that is unusual, we also have advanced intelligence that is going to tell us, give us more important context about each and every activity. So when we talk about incident investigation, we need to think about two things. First of all, we need to understand what is the extent of this incident. And to do that, all we have to do with Exabeam is just to scroll down. So this person has access to some critical files, and then he accessed a website of some sort, and he's sending a lot of emails to his personal email. So he's also accessing more and more files. His outgoing email activity is considered to be much higher than usual, and this is the the end of this session that we are investigating. So this might give us an idea as that this person is trying to leak data outside the company, and this is the files that he tried to access. Another aspect of an investigation should be what is the root cause of this? So why is Billy trying to do this? Or is it possibly that his account is compromised? So in order to do root cause analysis with Exabeam, all we have to do is go back in history by scrolling up. So if we scroll up, we were at this session on 2nd of July. Scrolling up, we will see previous activity, and activity is going to help us identify the root cause of this behavior. So if we just scroll a little bit up to the previous day, we're going to see that before he started accessing these files, he started accessing job search websites. So he's going to Glassdoor and Monster and Indeed. So we have for example, a rule to monitor a job search website, and this is giving him a score of 5, but at the same time, this is unusual for him. So it's a combination of rule-based plus behavioral-based. And this is, going to be saving us hours and hours of investigation. And if you notice, from the moment we started this investigation, all I had to do is just to click around and scroll up and down. Okay, I didn't have to think about what possibly he could have done, or I didn't have to think about what other log sources I need to look at. Why would I look at proxy logs, for example, if I want to know the root cause analysis? I might think about it, I might not, but with Exabeam, the important information is going to be presented to me automatically. And this is the importance of investigation automation. The full story is going to be laid out in front of us without any effort whatsoever. So from this point onwards, if we want to follow the cycle or the workflow of the SOC operations, the next step would be how can we remediate this incident, or how can we respond to this particular behavior. And from this point onwards, we can start engaging our SOAR capabilities, which can allow us to, for example, lock this user account or run a certain playbook that has a sequence of decisions or sequence of actions that is going to simulate a certain incident response procedure. So, but if you are interested in hearing more about our SOAR capabilities, you can feel free to reach out to us. But in terms of demo today, what we have seen is how Exabeam has automated the threat discovery. We have also seen how Exabeam can automate triage by using risk scoring, and also how Exabeam is is automating incident investigation. The last piece will be incident response. So to recap, after this demo, a security operations center, after adopting the advanced capabilities of Exabeam, would expect that more than 50% of the effort spent on tuning and investigation and response would be saved by introducing automation. Threat detection capabilities will be tremendously improved because behavioral-based detection are going to be more efficient against unknown threats, insider threats, and lateral movement, as opposed to rule-based detection, as we have mentioned before. Investigation time is going to be reduced tremendously, especially when we're talking about full and complete investigations. And last but not least, when it comes to response, the ability to use API-based integrations with all of your existing security tools to implement complex workflows on the fly without having to manually go into each one of those solutions is also going to be possible through Exabeam SOAR. So that's all we had for you today. Thank you for everyone that joined us in this session and also in the previous session. If you'd like to know more about Exabeam and how it's going to fit in your environment, whether you already have some foundations in your SOC or you don't. We are happy to support you in both cases. Exabeam.com/demo to request your one-on-one demo, or you can reach out to me or any one of my colleagues in the local team so we can support you moving forward. Thank you very much, and I wish you a great time in the rest of this conference.